The wind howled through the towering pines of Rainier, Oregon, rattling the windows of the Turner family's modest wooden house. Rain lashed against the roof in relentless sheets, each drop a drumbeat in the chaos of the late October storm. Inside, 6-year-old Ethan Turner pressed his small hands against the cool glass of the front window, his hazel eyes wide with wonder. Lightning split the sky, casting jagged shadows across the muddy yard, and thunder rolled like an angry beast prowling the forest beyond. "Mom, it's like the sky's fighting itself," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible over the tempest outside. From the kitchen, Emma Turner glanced up from chopping carrots for a late dinner, her nurse's instincts prickling with unease. "Ethan, sweetie, come away from there," she called, wiping her hands on her apron. "It's not safe with all that lightning." But Ethan didn't budge. Another flash illuminated the night, and this time, something moved in the yard. A dark, hulking shape staggering through the downpour. Ethan squinted, his breath fogging the glass. "Mom, there's something out there," he cried, his voice rising with excitement. Emma dropped her knife and hurried over, her heart thudding as she peered into the storm. At first, she saw nothing but rain and swaying trees. Then, a low whimper cut through the wind, followed by a faint scratching at the door. She froze, her hand tightening on Ethan's shoulder. "Stay back," she warned, stepping closer to the window. Lightning flashed again, revealing a German shepherd, its black and tan coat plastered with mud and water, its swollen belly swaying as it pawed desperately at the door. The dog's brown eyes locked onto hers through the glass, pleading with an almost human intensity. Emma's breath caught. Something about that gaze felt like a cry for help she couldn't ignore. Emma hesitated, her mind racing. Every instinct screamed caution. Stray dogs could be dangerous, especially in a storm like this. But the sight of the pregnant German shepherd trembling on their porch tugged at her heart. "Mom, she's scared?" Ethan said, tugging at her sleeve, his voice trembling with empathy. "We have to help her." Before Emma could respond, the dog scratched again, more urgently, her nails scraping the wood like a desperate Morse code. Thunder crashed, shaking the house, and the dog flinched, pressing herself closer to the door as if it were her last refuge. Emma took a deep breath, her nurse's compassion overriding her fear. "Okay, but you stay behind me," she told Ethan firmly, reaching for the doorknob. The moment she cracked the door open, a gust of icy wind and rain swept in, carrying the earthy scent of wet fur. The dog didn't lunge or bark. Instead, she staggered inside and collapsed onto the entryway rug, her sides heaving with exhaustion. Ethan gasped, kneeling beside her despite Emma's protests. "She's so wet, Mom. And look, she's gonna have babies." Up close, the dog's condition was worse than Emma had thought. Her fur was matted with mud, and a faint scar ran along her side, partially healed but ominous. As Emma knelt to check her, another bolt of lightning lit up the yard, and for a split second, she saw it. A human silhouette standing motionless at the edge of the trees, rain streaming off a hooded figure watching the house. Her blood ran cold. "Ethan, get back!" she snapped, slamming the door shut and locking it with shaking hands. The dog, whom Ethan would later name Shadow, lifted her head weakly, her eyes darting to the window as if she, too, sensed the danger lurking outside. Emma clutched her son close, her pulse pounding. Whatever this dog was running from, it had followed her here. The storm hadn't let up by the time Jake Turner pulled his truck into the driveway, the headlights cutting through the sheets of rain battering Rainier. He stepped inside, shaking water from his coat, and stopped dead at the sight of the drenched German shepherd sprawled across the entryway rug. "Emma, what's going on?" he asked, his voice thick with exhaustion from a long shift at the Rainier veterinary clinic. Emma looked up from where she knelt beside the dog, her face pale but resolute. "She showed up in the storm, Jake. Pregnant and hurt. I couldn't leave her out there." Ethan piped up from the floor, his small hands gently stroking the dog's matted fur. "She's scared, Dad, and there was someone outside. I saw them." Jake's brow furrowed as he dropped his bag and crouched beside them, his trained eyes scanning the animal's heaving form. The dog's breathing was shallow, her belly taut with impending motherhood, and a jagged scar marred her side, too clean to be an accident. Jake reached out a steady hand, letting the dog sniff him before running his fingers along her soaked coat. "This isn't a fresh wound," he murmured, his tone darkening. "Someone did this to her, maybe a week or two ago." He paused, noticing the worn leather collar around her neck. With careful fingers, he turned it over, revealing a small, soggy scrap of paper tucked inside a hidden fold. He unfolded it, squinting at the smeared ink. "Save us," it read, followed by a phone number. "What the hell?" he muttered, exchanging a glance with Emma. Her eyes widened, the memory of the silhouette in the yard flashing back. "Jake, that person I saw out there. What if they're after her?" Before he could answer, the dog's ears twitched, and she let out a low, guttural growl, her gaze fixed on the front door. The growl deepened, vibrating through the quiet house as the storm raged outside. Emma pulled Ethan closer, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Jake, she knows something's coming," she whispered, her voice tight with dread. Jake stood, wiping his wet hands on his jeans, and moved toward the window, peering through the blinds. The rain blurred everything beyond the porch, but the dog's unwavering stare at the door sent a chill down his spine. "Stay here," he told them, grabbing a flashlight from the hall table. Before he could reach the doorknob, a sharp, deliberate knock echoed through the room. 3 slow taps that cut through the howling wind like a warning. The dog, whom Ethan would soon call Shadow, struggled to her feet, her pregnant belly swaying, and positioned herself between Ethan and the door, teeth bared in a silent snarl. Jake hesitated, then opened the door a crack, keeping his body braced against it. A man stood on the porch, rain dripping from the brim of his hood, his bearded face shadowed but menacing. "Evening," he said, his voice gravelly and forced. "I'm looking for my dog. German Shepherd, pregnant. She ran off in the storm. Seen her?" Jake's grip tightened on the doorframe, his instincts screaming danger. "Haven't seen any dogs around here," he lied, keeping his tone steady. The man's eyes narrowed, flickering past Jake into the house. "Mind if I take a look? She's valuable to me." Shadow's growl grew louder, audible now, and the man's lips twitched into a sneer. "Sounds like she's right here," he said, stepping forward. Jake pushed the door against him, heart pounding. "I said no. Get off my property." The stranger lingered, his gaze cold and unyielding, before turning back into the rain. But not before Jake caught the glint of something metallic tucked into his waistband. The storm battered Rainier relentlessly as Jake slammed the door shut, his hands trembling as he turned the deadbolt. The image of the stranger's sneer and the glint of metal burned in his mind. "Emma, get Ethan upstairs now," he barked, his voice low but urgent. Emma scooped up their son, who clung to her with wide, frightened eyes, while Shadow limped after them, her growls fading into pained whimpers. The living room felt too exposed, the windows too fragile against whatever threat lingered outside. Jake grabbed his phone and dialed 911, his words tumbling out in a rush. "Someone just tried to force their way in. He's armed, I saw a gun. Hurry." The dispatcher's calm voice promised help, but every second stretched like an eternity. Shadow's ears twitched, her head snapping toward the window as a shadow shifted outside. Too close, too deliberate. Jake snatched a baseball bat from the hall closet, his heart pounding as he positioned himself near the door. The man Roy he'd later learn didn't knock again. Instead, a sudden crash shattered the silence. The sound of glass exploding as a fist punched through the window beside the door. Ethan screamed from the stairs, and Emma's voice cracked. "Jake!" Roy's arm reached in, fumbling for the lock, his sleeve soaked and torn. Jake swung the bat, connecting with the intruder's wrist. A guttural curse erupted from outside, and the arm withdrew, but not before Shadow lunged forward, her teeth sinking into Roy's hand as it lingered too long. The man howled, yanking free, and stumbled back into the rain. Blood streaked the broken glass, a grim testament to the dog's ferocity despite her condition. Jake's chest heaved. He'd bought them time but not safety. Sirens wailed in the distance, faint but growing louder, a lifeline cutting through the chaos. The sirens grew deafening as red and blue lights pierced the storm, flooding the Turner house with an eerie glow. Jake dropped the bat, his hands slick with sweat, and rushed to the stairs where Emma clutched Ethan, her face ashen. "He's gone for now," Jake said, pulling them into a tight embrace. Shadow collapsed near the door, her shoulder bleeding from a fresh gash, likely from the glass she'd lunged through to protect them. Ethan broke free and knelt beside her, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Shadow, you're hurt," he sobbed, stroking her matted fur. The dog's tail thumped weakly, her eyes locked on the boy as if reassuring him she'd be okay. Emma's nurse instincts kicked in. She grabbed a towel and pressed it to the wound, but Shadow's labored breathing told her this was beyond first aid. Heavy boots pounded up the porch steps, and 2 officers burst in, guns drawn. "Everyone all right?" the taller one shouted, scanning the room. Jake nodded, pointing to the shattered window. "He tried to break in, said he was looking for his dog. She fought him off." The officers exchanged a glance as they spotted Shadow, her blood pooling on the hardwood. "We need a vet. Fast," the second officer radioed, holstering his weapon. They secured the scene while an ambulance screeched to a halt outside. Not for the family, but for Roy, who'd been found limping down the street, hand mangled and cursing. The officers cuffed him as paramedics rushed Shadow onto a stretcher, her whimpers fading into the night. Emma held Ethan back as he reached for her, his small voice breaking. "Don't let her die, Mom." The house fell silent save for the rain, but the weight of the stranger's threat and the mystery of Shadow's desperate arrival hung heavier than ever. The Rainier veterinary clinic buzzed with quiet urgency as the Turner family huddled in the waiting room. The storm's roar now a distant hum beyond the thick walls. Ethan sat between his parents, his small hands twisting the hem of his jacket, eyes red from crying. "She has to be okay, right, Dad?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Jake forced a reassuring nod, though his own stomach churned with worry. As a vet, he knew Shadow's odds weren't great. Exhausted, pregnant, and now bleeding from a fresh wound. Emma squeezed his hand, her nurse's composure fraying at the edges. "She's a fighter, Ethan. She made it this far," she said, though her gaze kept darting to the surgery doors. The clock ticked past midnight, each minute stretching their nerves thinner, until a woman in a trench coat strode in, her boots leaving wet prints on the tile. "Jake Turner?" she asked, her voice crisp but not unkind. Jake stood, recognizing the badge clipped to her belt. "I'm Detective Claire Dawson, Rainier PD. We've got your intruder in custody. Name's Roy Carter. Says he owns that dog." She glanced at Ethan, softening slightly. "Kid says she's called Shadow?" Ethan nodded fiercely. "She's ours now. She saved us." Claire raised an eyebrow but didn't argue. "We ran the number from that note you found in her collar," she continued, pulling out a notepad. "Belongs to Ava Bennett. Reported missing 3 weeks ago. Animal rights activist. Last seen hiking with her German Shepherd near Columbia Ridge." Jake's jaw tightened, the pieces clicking into place. "That scar on her side. Someone cut her, didn't they?" Claire's eyes darkened. "Looks that way. And Roy's not talking yet, but he's got a rap sheet. Animal cruelty. Assault. We're digging deeper." Before Jake could press further, the clinic door swung open again, admitting a gust of damp air and a familiar figure, Lucas Hayes, the Turners' reclusive neighbor. His weathered face was etched with concern, his gray hair plastered from the rain. "Heard about the break-in," he said gruffly, nodding at Jake. "Came to check on you folks. And that dog." Emma frowned, puzzled. Lucas rarely left his cabin, let alone showed up unannounced. "You know something about her, don't you?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. Lucas hesitated, then pulled a faded photo from his jacket. A younger Ava Bennett, smiling beside a German Shepherd that looked strikingly like Shadow. "Saw her in the woods a month back," he admitted. Her and that dog near the old logging trails. She was asking questions about some breeder up there. Shady guy. Next I heard, she was gone. Ethan's eyes widened. That's Shadow's mom, he exclaimed, clutching the photo. Claire took it, studying it intently. You're sure about this, Hayes? She pressed. Lucas nodded, his jaw tight. Heard rumors about a guy named Carter running dogs out that way. Bad stuff, cages, starvation. Didn't think much of it till now. The surgery doors finally opened, and a vet in scrubs emerged, wiping his brow. She's stable, he announced, relief washing over the room. Bullet missed the vitals and we've stitched her up. She'll pull through. Ethan cheered, throwing his arms around Emma. But Jake's gaze lingered on Lucas. If Ava's out there, Shadow came to us for a reason, he said quietly. Claire pocketed the photo, her expression grim. Then we'd better find her, before Carter's buddies do. Outside, the storm quieted, but a new tension settled over Rainier, whispering of secrets buried deep in the woods. The Turner house felt like a sanctuary as dawn broke over Rainier. The storm's fury finally spent, leaving only puddles and broken branches in its wake. Shadow lay on a pile of blankets in Ethan's room, her bandaged shoulder a stark contrast to her sleek fur. Jake had brought her home from the clinic just hours ago, and now the family hovered around her, watching her every breath. Ethan sat cross-legged beside her, his face lit with a mix of awe and worry. She's gonna be a mom soon, right, Dad? He asked, tracing a finger gently along her ear. Jake nodded, kneeling to check her pulse. Any day now, buddy. She's strong. Stronger than most dogs I've seen. Emma stood by the door, arms crossed, still shaken from the night's chaos but softened by the sight of Shadow's trust in them. Then it happened. A sharp yelp escaped Shadow as her body tensed, her belly rippling with contractions. Ethan's eyes widened. Mom! It's starting! He cried, scooting closer. Emma rushed to grab towels and a bowl of warm water, her nurse's training kicking in despite the unfamiliar territory of canine birth. Jake took charge, his voice calm but firm. She's in labor. Ethan, stay back a little. She needs space. The first puppy emerged minutes later, a tiny, wriggling bundle encased in a sack that Shadow instinctively tore open, licking it clean with tender precision. Ethan gasped, naming it on the spot. Storm. 'Cause he came in the storm. A second followed, lighter in color, and Ethan dubbed her Hazel. The room filled with the soft squeaks of new life, a fragile miracle unfolding amid the tension of the past night. But Shadow's eyes flickered to the window, her ears twitching as if she sensed something beyond the walls. The third puppy came quickly, but something was wrong. Its tiny body lay still, the sack unbroken. Shadow whined, nudging it with her nose, her eyes darting to Jake in a silent plea. Dad, he's not moving. Ethan cried, his voice cracking as tears welled up. Jake sprang into action, gently tearing the membrane and rubbing the puppy's chest with his fingertips, his vet skills battling the clock. Emma held her breath, clutching Ethan's shoulder, while Shadow watched with an intensity that felt almost human. Seconds stretched into an agonizing eternity until, finally, the puppy twitched, a faint squeak breaking the silence. Blaze? Ethan whispered through sobs. 'Cause he fought to live. Jake placed the revived pup beside Shadow, who licked it fiercely, relief washing over her exhausted frame. A fourth arrived soon after, small but vocal, and Ethan named her Luna, her cries echoing like a tiny howl. The family sat in reverent silence, marveling at the 4 new lives nestled against Shadow's side: Storm, Hazel, Blaze, and Luna. Ethan reached out, his touch featherlight on Blaze's damp fur. You're a good mom, Shadow, he said, his voice thick with pride. Shadow's tail thumped once, but her gaze shifted again to the window, her body tensing despite the exhaustion of labor. Emma followed her stare, unease creeping back. She's still on edge, she murmured to Jake, who nodded grimly. She knows something we don't. Maybe about Roy or whoever sent her here. The puppies squirmed closer to their mother, oblivious to the weight of her vigilance. Outside, The forest loomed dark and silent, its secrets pressing against the house like an unseen hand. Shadow had brought life into their home, but with it came a shadow of danger that refused to fade. Morning light filtered through the pines of Rainier, casting long shadows across the Turner backyard as the family tried to reclaim a sense of normalcy. The puppies, Storm, Hazel, Blaze, and Luna, nursed contentedly in a laundry basket padded with blankets, their tiny squeaks a soft counterpoint to the stillness. Shadow rested nearby, her bandaged shoulder stark against her fur, but her eyes remained restless, darting toward the window with a vigilance that hadn't eased since the night of the storm. Ethan sat beside her, coloring a picture of a dog family, while Emma brewed coffee in the kitchen, her mind replaying Roy's sneer and the mystery of Ava Bennett. Jake stepped outside to check the broken window, his jaw tight with unease, when a sharp bark jolted him back to attention. Shadow had risen, her movements stiff but determined, and limped to the back door, scratching at it with urgent insistence. "Mom! Dad! She wants out!" Ethan called, dropping his crayons. Jake opened the door, and Shadow bolted into the yard, her nose low to the ground as she beelined for a patch of overgrown grass near the fence. She began to dig, her paws flinging dirt with a frenzy that belied her injuries. Emma joined them, frowning. "What's she after?" she asked, but Jake's eyes narrowed as he spotted something metallic glinting beneath the soil. He knelt beside Shadow, brushing away clumps of earth, and unearthed a small, rusted box, about the size of a paperback, its lid scratched and dented. Shadow sat back, panting, her gaze fixed on the box as if it held the key to her desperate journey. Ethan clapped his hands. "It's treasure, Dad." But Jake's fingers trembled as he pried it open, revealing a stack of papers, photos, and a USB drive nestled inside. Jake lifted the contents of the box with careful hands, his breath catching as he unfolded the topmost paper. A handwritten note stained with dirt and time. "Ava's log," he read aloud, his voice barely above a whisper. "Roy Carter's breeding operation. Proof of abuse, illegal sales." Photos spilled out next. Emaciated dogs in cramped cages, their eyes hollow with despair, and a grainy shot of Roy himself, smirking beside a stack of crates. The USB drive gleamed ominously, promising more secrets. Emma's face paled as she took a photo, her nurse's heart breaking at the sight. "She was gathering evidence," she said, piecing it together. "Shadow brought this to us." Ethan crouched beside the box, his young mind racing. "She's a hero, Mom. Like in my comics." But Shadow's ears twitched, her body tensing as if the forest beyond the fence whispered a warning. The back door creaked open, and Lucas Hayes stepped into the yard, his weathered face tightening as he spotted the box. "Knew I'd find you out here," he said gruffly, pulling a faded photo from his pocket. Rusty, a German shepherd with a notched ear, staring blankly from a cage. "Recognize this one?" Jake's eyes widened. "That's from Ava's stash. You saw this dog?" Lucas nodded, his voice low. "Rusty was hers too. Saw Carter shoot him in the woods a year back. Punishment for Ava nosing around. She must have trained Shadow to hide this if things went south." The air grew heavy with the weight of his words. Emma clutched the note tighter. "Then Ava's still out there, and Roy knows we have this." Shadow's head snapped toward the trees, a low growl rumbling in her throat, as if the past she'd buried was clawing its way back to the surface. Night settled over Rainier like a heavy shroud, the forest beyond the Turner house whispering with the rustle of pine needles. Inside, the family tried to find comfort in routine. Ethan sprawled on the living room floor, reading a comic to the puppies, while Emma and Jake pored over Ava's evidence at the kitchen table. The photos and notes painted a grim picture of Roy Carter's cruelty, and the USB drive sat unopened, its contents a Pandora's box they weren't ready to face. Shadow lay near the front window, her 4 pups, Storm, Hazel, Blaze, and Luna, nestled against her, but her ears stayed pricked, her body coiled with tension. "She hasn't relaxed since we found that box," Emma murmured, glancing at Jake. He nodded, his vet's intuition sensing the same unease. "She knows he's not done with her." The words hung in the air, prophetic and chilling, when the lights flickered and died, plunging the house into darkness. Ethan yelped, dropping his comic, and the puppies whimpered as Shadow sprang to her feet, a deep growl rumbling from her chest. "Power outage?" Emma asked, her voice tight, but Jake was already moving to the window, peering into the black void outside. "No storm tonight," he said grimly, grabbing a flashlight from the counter. The beam cut through the gloom, revealing nothing but swaying trees, until a shadow darted across the yard, too large to be an animal. Shadow's growl turned into a snarl, her hackles rising as she positioned herself between Ethan and the door. Jake's heart sank. "He's back," he whispered, reaching for the baseball bat he'd left by the couch. A faint creak sounded from the back porch, followed by the unmistakable crunch of boots on gravel. Roy Carter had returned, and this time he wasn't knocking. The back door shuddered as something heavy slammed against it, the wood groaning under the force. "Emma, take Ethan upstairs. Lock yourselves in," Jake hissed, gripping the bat with white knuckles. Emma scooped up Ethan and the puppy basket, her legs trembling as she raced for the stairs. Shadow barked fiercely, her wounded shoulder forgotten as she lunged toward the noise, teeth bared. Jake followed, flashlight in one hand, bat in the other, his pulse roaring in his ears. The door burst open with a splintering crash, and Roy Carter staggered in, his bearded face twisted with rage, a pistol glinting in his grip. "Where's my damn dog?" he roared, his voice slurring with fury and desperation. Jake swung the bat, aiming for Roy's arm, but the man dodged, the weapon grazing his shoulder instead. Roy raised the gun, his eyes locking onto Jake, but Shadow was faster. She leaped, a blur of black and tan, and sank her teeth into his wrist, forcing the pistol to clatter to the floor. He screamed, flailing as blood sprayed, but managed to kick Shadow hard in the ribs. She yelped, tumbling back, and a gunshot rang out as Roy's finger grazed the trigger in the struggle. The bullet buried itself in the wall, inches from Jake's head. Upstairs, Ethan's muffled sob echoed, and Emma's voice called out, "Jake!" Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have seen the blackout and called the cops. Roy cursed, shoving Shadow aside and bolting for the door as red and blue lights flooded the yard. Jake dropped to his knees beside Shadow, her breathing ragged but alive. "You saved me again," he whispered, stroking her fur as the police stormed in, leaving the night fractured but unbroken. The Rainier veterinary clinic was a blur of antiseptic and tension as Jake carried Shadow through the doors, her blood staining his shirt from the fresh wound in her side. Ethan trailed behind, clutching Emma's hand, his face streaked with tears. "She can't die, Dad. She can't," he pleaded, his voice breaking. The vet team whisked Shadow into surgery, leaving the Turners in the waiting room, the puppy's basket a silent reminder of her fierce protection. Emma sank into a chair, her nurse's calm shattered by the night's violence. "She took that kick for you, Jake," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the surgery doors. Jake paced, guilt gnawing at him. He'd failed to stop Roy, and Shadow had paid the price again. The clock ticked past 2 a.m., each second a weight on their shoulders, until Detective Claire Dawson strode in, her face grim but triumphant. "We found her," Claire announced, cutting through the silence. "Ava Bennett alive, locked in a cabin off Columbia Ridge. Roy's been holding her there since she went missing." Emma's hand flew to her mouth, relief warring with shock. "Is she okay?" Jake asked, stopping mid-step. Claire nodded. "Malnourished, bruised, but alive. Our K-9 unit sniffed her out after we raided his property. Your evidence box gave us the warrant." Ethan looked up, eyes wide. "Shadow knew where to go, didn't she?" Claire softened, crouching to his level. "She did, kid. She ran straight to you folks to save her owner." The surgery doors swung open, and the vet emerged, scrub stained but smiling faintly. "She's stable again. Tough as nails, that one." Relief flooded the room, but Claire's next words hung heavy. "Ava's asking for her dog. She's on her way here." The clinic doors burst open 30 minutes later, admitting a frail woman in a wheelchair, pushed by a nurse from Rainier General. Ava Bennett's short auburn hair framed a gaunt face, her green eyes sunken but fierce with determination. She spotted the Turners and froze, her gaze darting to the puppy basket. "Where's Shadow?" she rasped, her voice raw from weeks of captivity. Emma stepped forward, offering a shaky smile. "She's in recovery, hurt protecting us from Roy. She's going to be okay." Ava's shoulders slumped with relief, tears spilling down her cheeks. Ethan approached, holding out the basket. "She had babies. This is Storm, Hazel, Blaze, and Luna," he said proudly, pointing to each squirming pup. Ava reached out with trembling hands, brushing Blaze's tiny head, and sobbed. A sound of grief, gratitude, and exhaustion all at once. "I thought I'd lost her," Ava whispered, looking up at Jake. "Roy caught me digging into his operation, cages, dead dogs, sales to labs. I told him I'd expose him, and he attacked us in the woods. Shadow fought him off, but he stunned her, took us both." She shuddered, clutching the wheelchair's arms. "I hid that evidence box, trained her to bury it if I didn't come back. She escaped, didn't she?" Jake nodded, awed by the dog's loyalty. "Straight to our door, 3 weeks later." Ava's eyes met Ethan's, softening. "You're why she made it. You believed her." The nurse hovered, insisting Ava return to the hospital, but she gripped Emma's hand. "Please, take care of her pups, till I'm strong enough." As Ava was wheeled away, Shadow's faint whine echoed from recovery, a call from the past reaching for the future, and the family she'd chosen to save her. The Turner house buzzed with a fragile peace as Ava Bennett settled into the guest room. Her hospital discharge a reluctant compromise with doctors who'd wanted her to stay longer. Shadow, still stiff from surgery, greeted her with a slow wag of her tail, limping over to rest her head in Ava's lap. Ethan hovered nearby, the puppy basket cradled in his arms, his face beaming with pride. "They're growing fast, Ava. Hazel's my favorite. She's so quiet," he said, lifting the light-colored pup for her to see. Ava smiled weakly, her gaunt features softening as she stroked Hazel's fur. "You've done good, Ethan. Shadow picked the right family." Emma bustled in with a tray of tea, her nurse's eye noting Ava's pallor but saying nothing. Recovery would take time, and they'd agreed to foster her and the pups together. Jake sat across from Ava, the evidence box now with the police but its weight still lingering. "Roy's locked up tight," he said, trying to ease her tension. "Claire says he's facing life, no parole." Ava nodded, her fingers tightening around her mug. "He deserves worse. Those dogs he hurt, I couldn't save them all." Her voice cracked, and Shadow whined, nudging her hand as if to comfort her. Ethan piped up, his young logic cutting through the gloom. "Shadow saved you, and now we can save her babies. Hazel can stay with us. Right, Mom?" Emma exchanged a glance with Jake, who shrugged with a grin. "One pup won't hurt," he said, and Ethan cheered, hugging Hazel close. Ava's eyes glistened. She'd lost so much, but this makeshift family offered a lifeline. Outside, the pines swayed gently, a quiet promise of healing after the storm. The afternoon stretched lazily as Ethan devised a plan for the pups' futures, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Storm can go with Ava, he's tough like Shadow. Blaze can live at Grandpa's farm, and Luna. Maybe Detective Claire can train her like a police dog." Ava chuckled, the first real laugh they'd heard from her, and Jake nodded approvingly. "Kid's got a knack for this," he said, ruffling Ethan's hair. Emma started to agree when a knock at the door interrupted, sharp and unexpected. Shadow's ears perked, but she didn't growl, a sign of trust. Jake opened it to find Lucas Hayes, his grizzled face softened by a rare smile, holding a small wooden frame. "Thought you'd want this," he said, handing it over. A faded photo of Rusty, the German shepherd from Ava's past, standing proud in a forest clearing. Ava's breath hitched as she took it, her fingers tracing the image. "Rusty, he was my first rescue. Roy killed him to break me." Lucas shuffled his feet, his voice gruff but kind. "Saw Shadow save you folks from that bastard. She's got Rusty's spirit, saved me too, in a way. Been alone too long, till this mess pulled me out. Ethan grinned, oblivious to the weight of the moment. Shadow's a hero to everybody. Ava met Lucas's eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. Pain shared, and now hope reclaimed. Thank you, she whispered, clutching the photo. As Lucas left, Emma watched Shadow settle beside Ava and Ethan, her pups tumbling around them. Roy's shadow still loomed in Ava's fragile gaze, but this new family, forged by a dog's courage, was a start. The question lingered, though, where would Shadow truly belong when the healing was done? The moon hung low over Rainier, its pale light filtering through the pines as the Turner house settled into a rare quiet. Ava slept fitfully in the guest room, her dreams haunted by cages and gunfire, while Shadow dozed beside her, ever watchful. Downstairs, Jake and Emma tidied the kitchen, the puppy's basket a soft chorus of snores in the corner. Ethan, restless despite the late hour, slipped outside with a flashlight, his 6-year-old curiosity pulling him toward the yard where Shadow had unearthed Ava's evidence. The air was crisp, scented with damp earth and resin, and the forest beyond the fence loomed like a silent witness. Shadow stirred, sensing his absence, and limped after him, her shoulder still tender but her instincts sharp. Ethan knelt near the spot where the box had been, tracing the disturbed soil with his fingers. "Did you hide more secrets, Shadow?" he whispered as she nudged his side, her nose twitching. Without warning, she began to dig again, her paws scraping frantically at a new patch a few feet away. Dirt flew, and Ethan shone his light, gasping as metal glinted. A worn leather collar, its tag engraved with a single word, Rusty. Shadow whined, pressing her muzzle to it, her eyes glistening in the beam. Ethan clutched the collar, heart pounding. "Mom! Dad!" he yelled, racing back inside, Shadow at his heels. Jake and Emma met him at the door, Ava staggering behind, awakened by the commotion. "It's Rusty's," Ethan cried, holding it up. Ava's face crumpled, her knees buckling as she sank to the floor, clutching the collar to her chest. "He was my first," she sobbed. "And Shadow kept him with her all this time." Emma knelt beside Ava, her arm around the trembling woman, while Jake took the collar from Ethan's small hands, turning it over in the dim light. The leather was cracked, the tag scratched but legible, Rusty's name a silent testament to a life cut short. "Ava, what happened to him?" Jake asked gently, though his voice carried the weight of suspicion. Ava wiped her eyes, her breath ragged. "Rusty was my first rescue from Roy's hellhole. A German shepherd like Shadow, loyal to a fault. I caught Roy beating him one night when I snuck into his property. Tried to stop it, but Roy, he shot him right in front of me, said it was a warning." She clutched Shadow's fur, her voice breaking. "I buried Rusty in the woods, but I kept his collar. When Roy caught me later, I gave it to Shadow, told her to hide it if I didn't make it back." Ethan's eyes widened, his young mind piecing together the heroism. "She kept her promise, Ava. She brought it here for you." Shadow licked Ava's hand, her whine soft but piercing, as if mourning her lost companion anew. Jake exchanged a look with Emma. Shadow's intelligence was staggering, her loyalty a thread tying past to present. "This could mean more than Roy's operation," Jake said quietly. "If he killed Rusty to silence Ava, there might be others." Ava nodded, her resolve hardening through the tears. "He bragged about cleaning up loose ends. Shadow knows where the bodies are. I'm sure of it." Outside, the pines rustled as if echoing her words, their whispers hinting at secrets still buried, waiting to be unearthed in the light of Rainier's justice. The sun broke through Rainier's ever-present clouds, bathing the town square in rare golden light as the community gathered at Columbia Park. A small stage stood at the center, draped in blue banners, where the Turners, Ava, and Shadow took their places amid a swelling crowd. Ethan clutched Shadow's leash, her shoulder scar a badge of courage beneath her gleaming fur, while Storm, Hazel, Blaze, and Luna tumbled playfully in a pen nearby. Ava, still frail but standing tall, adjusted a microphone with trembling hands. "This is for Shadow," she began, her voice steadying. "And for every animal Roy Carter tried to silence." Applause rippled through the onlookers. Locals, reporters, even rescue workers who'd taken in the dogs seized from Roy's property. Detective Claire Dawson stood off stage, her sharp eyes scanning the faces, ever vigilant. Ethan beamed as Ava recounted Shadow's journey. Her escape, her plea at the Turner door, the evidence she'd buried to save her owner. "She's a hero," Ava said, tears glinting. "And she brought us together to fight for what's right." The crowd cheered, but Ethan tugged Jake's sleeve, whispering, "Dad, tell them about Rusty." Jake stepped forward, holding up the worn collar. Shadow didn't just save Ava, she carried the memory of Rusty, another victim of Roy's cruelty. "There might be more out there, and we owe it to them to keep looking." Murmurs spread as Claire nodded, jotting notes. She'd already sent a team to scour the woods based on Ava's hunch. The mayor presented Shadow with a medal, a shiny disc Ethan proudly hung around her neck. "She's the bravest dog ever," he declared, sparking laughter and more applause. But Ava's gaze drifted to the pines, a shadow of worry lingering. As the ceremony wound down, Lucas Hayes shuffled through the crowd, his weathered hands stuffed in his jacket pockets. He approached the stage, catching Jake's eye with a nod that carried years of unspoken weight. "Got something to say," he muttered, climbing up beside Ava. The microphone crackled as he cleared his throat, his gruff voice cutting through the chatter. "I knew Ava before all this, helped her sneak around Roy's place a few times, back when I was still a ranger. Saw things I shouldn't have, dogs like Rusty dying slow in those cages. Kept quiet too long." The crowd hushed, stunned by the confession of Rainier's quiet loner. Ava's eyes widened, a mix of gratitude and shock. "You never told me," she whispered. Lucas shrugged, guilt etching his face. "Thought it'd keep you safe. It didn't." Ethan hugged Shadow tighter, her metal glinting as she nuzzled his cheek, sensing the tension. Claire stepped forward, her tone firm. "That's new evidence, Hayes. We'll need a statement. Could crack this wider open." Lucas nodded, resigned but resolute. Ava squeezed his arm, a silent thank you for breaking his silence at last. The ceremony ended with a pledge. Ava announced a foundation in Shadow's name, funded by donations pouring in, to rescue and rehabilitate abused animals. The crowd dispersed, buzzing with hope, but the Turners lingered with Ava, Claire, and Lucas. "Shadow's done more than save us," Emma said softly, watching the pups play. "She's changing Rainier." Yet as they turned to leave, Ava's gaze locked on Ethan and Shadow, a question unspoken. After all this, where would Shadow's heart truly lie? The answer loomed closer, a decision that would seal their bond forever under Oregon's watchful pines. The living room of the Turner house glowed with the soft flicker of a fireplace, casting warmth over the pine walls as dusk settled over Rainier. 2 weeks had passed since the ceremony, and the air carried the crisp promise of winter. Ava sat on the couch, her strength returning, her auburn hair catching the light as she watched Shadow sprawl across the rug. Ethan nestled beside the dog, his fingers tracing the metal around her neck, while Storm, Hazel, Blaze, and Luna, now 8 weeks old, tumbled over each other in playful chaos. Emma and Jake joined them, a tray of hot cocoa in hand, the weight of the past month pressing on their silence. Tonight wasn't just a gathering, it was a crossroads. Ava's new apartment awaited, and with it, the question of Shadow's future loomed large, unspoken but heavy in every glance. Ethan broke the quiet first, his voice small but firm. "Shadow belongs with all of us, doesn't she?" He looked from Ava to his parents, eyes pleading for an answer that wouldn't tear his heart in two. Ava smiled, though it wavered, and slid to the floor beside him. "She does, Ethan. She chose you that night in the storm. Chose your family to save me." Shadow lifted her head, her brown eyes shifting between them, as if she understood every word. Jake cleared his throat, setting his mug down. "Ava, you're her owner. She's yours by right, but she's part of us now too." Emma nodded, her voice soft, We can't imagine this house without her, or you. Ava's breath hitched, tears brimming as Shadow nudged her hand. Then Ethan's, her loyalty a bridge between two worlds. The room held its breath, waiting for a decision that would define them all. Ava wiped her eyes, her resolve steadying as she looked at Shadow. Then Ethan. I lost everything to Roy. My home, my fight, almost my life. Shadow gave it back by finding you. I won't take her from the boy she risked everything for. She took Ethan's hand, placing it on Shadow's head beside her own. She'll live with me in town, but she'll be here every weekend, every holiday, part of both our families. That's her promise and mine. Ethan's face lit up, tears spilling as he threw his arms around Shadow. Then Ava. You mean it? She's ours too. Ava nodded, laughing through her sobs. Always, Ethan. Emma and Jake joined the embrace, a circle of warmth sealing the pact under Rainier's watchful pines. As the fire crackled, Ethan pulled back, his voice bright with purpose. Shadow taught me something. Heroes don't need to talk. They just need someone to believe in them. I'll always believe in her. He stood, small but towering with conviction, and ran to grab his sketchbook, returning with a drawing. Shadow surrounded by her pups, Ava, and the Turners, a family forged in storm and sacrifice. Ava clutched it, her voice breaking. This is us, because of her. Outside, the wind sang through the trees, carrying the echoes of Rusty and countless others Shadow had honored. The pups settled, Storm with Ava, Hazel with the Turners, Blaze at the farm, Luna with Claire, each a legacy of courage. Shadow rose, her metal glinting, and lay between Ethan and Ava, her eyes peaceful at last. In that moment, beneath Oregon's endless sky, a promise was kept, not just of survival, but of love unbroken, a bond that would endure beyond the shadows of the past.